Well, good morning. It is Saturday, August 7th, and we are gathered for a morning devotion. Again, we're using Brian McLaren's Seeking Aliveness. And today's devotion is called Retell the Ancient Stories. Like the parables of Jesus, the Adam and Eve stories, and the Cain and Abel, the flood, the tower stories in Genesis, don't necessarily have to be factually true to tell an actual truth about us and our civilization. These ancient stories courageously expose how all civilization was founded on violence and oppression, producing luxury and ease for a few, but exhaustion and degradation for many. They warn us that unjust structures are unsustainable. They advise the flood of change will sweep away injustice away, and internal conflict will thwart arrogant ambitions. They promise that in the long run, justice and reconciliation will prevail over injustice and rivalry. If we aren't careful, we can grow comfortable and complacent with a status quo of injustice and oppression and violence. That's why we are wise to gather often and retell these ancient stories. That's why we rise together often and retell these stories rather than being conformed to this world and mixed up our priorities. We can seek together to be transformed by different and better stories so that we can join with God in the healing of our world. To be alive is to join God in caring about the oppressed, the needy, the powerless, the victims, and the vulnerable. To be alive is to believe that injustice is not sustainable and to share God's desire for a better world. To be alive is to look at our world and say, God is better than that, and know that our world can be better, and so can we. And so what he's basically telling us. So in Jewish celebrations, particularly the Passover, they retell the story of the Exodus, and they tell it over and over again every time they celebrate the Passover. And why do they tell the stories? They tell the stories so that we won't forget. And they tell the stories so that we can see how God is being revealed in these stories. And so what Brian is telling us here is to continue to tell the stories. That's why in church, we've heard all the Bible stories. We've heard pretty much everything in the Bible over and over again and rehashed and recounted, sometimes in very twisted ways in my sermons, but we get a different perspective. But we retell the stories so we do not forget the creative power of God in this world. And so in telling those stories, we can see God's character. We can see that as a God of love and a God of justice and of economic equality for all people. We can see the characteristics of God being revealed. So tell the stories of God. Tell the stories of Jesus in this world and tell them so that we never forget. And so he passed them on from generation to generation. Amen.